Good day, students. Today's lesson will address judgment, decision-making, and reasoning. In addressing these concepts, we will focus on reasoning and how this leads us to make judgments, inferences, conclusions, and decisions. We use an array of methods that are sometimes unconscious to come to conclusions and final decisions. Hence, this lesson will focus your attention on what we do and how we do it to handle the everyday decisions we face. Some decisions are bigger and more important than others, and some have bigger and more serious consequences than others. So it will be worth your while to attend this lesson and learn more about judgment and decision making. The three core objectives for this class include to explain judgment and decision making to you, to describe deductive reasoning and how this type of reasoning helps you reach a conclusion, and finally, to articulate inductive reasoning to you and how this type of reasoning also helps you to make decisions, inferences, and come to conclusions. Let us start our lesson, class. The title for this lesson today is Decision Making and Reasoning. I hope you have a good time in learning about these processes in more depth. Let's consider the meaning of the word decision making. Oxford Languages defines decision making as the action or process of making important decisions. When making decisions, you have to weigh up your options, perhaps do some research, and engage in reasoning to get to the right choice you need to make. Have you ever wondered, what are some of the strategies that guide our decision making? What are some of the forms of deductive reasoning people may use? How do people use inductive reasoning to make inferences and to reach conclusions? Well, students, my aim is to address these questions for you in this lesson. It is officially the start of our lesson on decision making and reasoning. Let us start with core objective number 1, which encompasses judgment and decision making. In this first core objective, we will be addressing the topics of classical decision theory, satisficing, elimination by aspects, and heuristics and biases. Let's just think about this. Why do we have to make judgments and decisions? Well, the overarching goal of judgment and decision making is to select from among choices or to evaluate opportunities that come our ways. We ultimately have many choices we make every day. Sometimes we are not even aware of the many choices we make on a daily basis. Obviously, some are bigger choices than others. The earliest models of how people make decisions are referred to as classical decision theory. Most of these models were devised by economists and statisticians and not by psychologists. This theory assumes that problems are clear, that objectives are clear, that people agree on criteria and weights of decisions, that all alternatives are known, that all consequences can be anticipated, and that decision-making is rational. In a nutshell, the classical decision theory posits that people are fully aware of all the options for choosing, and that they can evaluate the differences between two or more outcomes, no matter how subtle the distinctions among the options may be. It also notes that people make their choices as to maximize something of value, whatever that something may be. People will thus make a decision which will give them the best possible value in any given decision-making situation. Oxford Languages defines the word satisficing as to decide on and pursue a course of action that will satisfy the minimum requirements necessary to achieve a particular goal. Satisficing was first defined during the 1950s when some psychologists started to challenge the classical decision theories and unlimited rationality in particular. When a person is satisficing, they do not consider all the available options and then carefully compute which of those many options will maximize their gains and minimize their losses. Rather, in satisficing, every option is considered one by one, and then an option is selected as soon as one that is satisfactory or just good enough to meet the minimum level of acceptability is found. Satisficing is perhaps linked to the notion of saving time on making decisions, not spending too much time on ruminating over what decision to make, and taking time away from other activities that we must spend time on every day. The elimination by aspects is a model of decision-making technique developed during the 1970s. According to this model, when we are faced with multiple options, this method identifies a single attribute or feature that is most important to the decision maker. When that feature is not met by the option, then it is eliminated from being a possibility. The decision maker applies different attributes and features until a single best option is left. For example, you want to buy a new car. The first feature on your list is the safety rating of the car. So, the car brands with the highest safety ratings will be identified by you, and you will compile a list. The second attribute you might be looking for is gas or fuel usage. From your compiled list, you investigate each car's fuel usage and discard those that are safe but not fuel efficient. You will continue with this method until you only have a few or a single car option left. Heuristics, as you've learned in previous lessons, are mental shortcuts. Such mental shortcuts lighten the cognitive load of making decisions, but they also allow for a greater chance of error or biased judgments. There are several heuristics relevant to psychology. Let us consider them. The three types of heuristics we will discuss in this lesson include the Representativeness Heuristic, the Availability Heuristic, and the Anchoring and Adjustment Heuristic. The representative heuristic is a widely used heuristic. It is a mental shortcut that helps us make a decision by comparing information to our mental prototypes or stereotypes. It is the tendency to judge the frequency or likelihood of an event by the extent to which it resembles the typical case. Heavy reliance on this leads people to ignore other factors that heavily influence the actual frequencies and likelihoods, such as rules of chance, independence, and norms. Let me give you an example of the representative heuristic. Say someone came to you and described a person with the name John. He says John is quite shy and a little withdrawn, but really helpful. John doesn't really have many friends and is not really interested in meeting new people at all. Neither is he interested in people in general. He is a meek and tidy person and has a need for order and structure and has a great passion for detail. How do people assess the probability that John is engaged in a particular occupation from a list of possibilities? For example, being a farmer, a salesman, an airplane pilot, a librarian, or a physician. According to the representativeness heuristic, the probability that John is a librarian, for example, is assessed by the degree to which his is representative of or similar to the stereotype of a librarian. The availability heuristic is also a heuristic that is often used. The availability heuristic involves relying on information that comes to mind quickly and inevitably information that has been stored in our minds already and easily retrieved. This is known as availability. When we are faced with decisions, a number of related events or situations might immediately jump to the forefront of our thoughts. The result is that you might judge those events to be more frequent or more probable than others. You thus give greater credibility to this information and tend to overestimate the probability and likelihood of similar things happening to you in the future. For example, After seeing several news reports about carjackings in your area, you might make a judgment that hijackings are much more common than it really is in your area. This type of heuristic can be helpful and important in decision making. When faced with a choice, we often lack the time or resources to investigate in greater depth. However, it can also be negative, leading us not to think further than the information that is readily available to us and making new inferences about things and situations. I want you to be aware of this. Be vigilant of mental shortcuts. They are helpful and save us time, but often may lead us to trouble and making the wrong decisions or choices. As mentioned, heuristics can be helpful, but they can cause problems. Reports of child abductions, airplane accidents, and train derailments often lead people to believe that such events are much more typical than they truly are. For example, after you see a movie about a nuclear disaster, you might become more convinced that a nuclear disaster or war or accident is highly likely. After seeing a car overturned on the side of the road, you might believe that your own likelihood of getting into an accident is much higher than it really is. Plus, the longer you stay preoccupied with the event, the more available it will be in your mind, and the more probable you will believe it to be. The problem is that certain events tend to stand out in our minds more than others. Excessive media coverage can cause this to happen, but sometimes the novelty or drama surrounding an event can cause it to become more available in our memories. Because the event is so unusual, it takes on greater significance, which leads you to incorrectly assume that the event is much more common than it really is. This heuristic is the tendency to judge the frequency or likelihood of an event by using a starting point called an anchor, and then making adjustments upwards or downwards. When people make quantitative estimates, their estimates may be heavily influenced by previous values of the item. For example, it is not an accident that a used car salesman always always starts negotiating with a high price for a used car and then works his way down. The salesman is trying to get the consumer anchored on the high price so that when he offers a lower price, the consumer will estimate that the lower price represents a good value. This heuristic is also common in terms of the property market. Sellers usually put their property on the market at the maximum price they would like to get, being negotiable for a lower price, or meeting each other in the middle when getting an offer for their property. Students, before we move on with our lesson, I just want to highlight to you that not all heuristics or mental shortcuts lead to problems. For example, the take that heuristic, which is a very simple heuristic, often leads to very good choices. A good example of this heuristic again is you wanting to buy a new car. You'll make a list of your price range, the safety features and fuel consumption rate that is acceptable to you. When you find the car or cars that fit in that bracket, you can decide on the most attractive option for you quickly. It has proved to be quite successful in the past if applied correctly and responsibly. Let us now move on to our next core objective for this lesson, which is to discuss reasoning. Our second core objective is deductive reasoning. However, before we discuss that, let's consider what exactly reasoning is. So, what is reasoning? Judgment and decision-making involve the evaluation of opportunities and selecting one choice over another. A related kind of thinking, often familiar to students in logic courses, is reasoning. Reasoning can be defined as the process of drawing conclusions from principles and from evidence, moving on from what is already known to infer a new conclusion or to evaluate a proposed conclusion. Let us move on to consider deductive reasoning. Let us start our core objectives on reasoning. The two types of reasoning include deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. In short, deductive reasoning is the process of reasoning from one or more general statements regarding what is already known to reach a logically certain conclusion. It often involves reasoning from one or more general statements regarding what is known in terms of a specific application of the general statement. One of the valuable and additional aspects of reasoning include that people employ reasoning to reach a state of logic. Professional logicians often engage in reasoning sessions to get to logical statements. Furthermore, deductive reasoning is the process of reasoning from one or more general statements regarding what is already known to reach a logically certain conclusion. It often involves reasoning from one or more general statements regarding what is known in terms of a specific application of the general statement. On the other hand, inductive reasoning is the process of reasoning from specific facts. Deductive reasoning is basically based on logical propositions. Remember that we have talked about propositions before. A proposition is an assertion, and it may be either true or false. Furthermore, an assertion is a confident and forceful statement of fact or belief. Let us consider premises in terms of propositions. In a logical argument, propositions about which arguments are made are referred to as premises. Psychologists are interested in propositions that may be connected in ways that require people to draw reasoned conclusions. That is, what makes deductive reasoning interesting and useful is that people connect various propositions to draw conclusions. Psychologists want to know how people connect propositions to draw conclusions. Some of them are well-reasoned and some are not well-reasoned at all. The American Psychological Association defines a premise as a proposition that forms part of a larger argument, a statement from which a further statement is to be deduced, especially as one of a series of such steps leading to a conclusion. There are two types of deductive reasoning. namely conditional reasoning and syllogistic reasoning. Let us start with conditional reasoning. One of the primary types of deductive reasoning is conditional reasoning. In conditional reasoning, the person has to make a decision on an if-then proposition. In other words, if A, which is the antecedent, then C, it is the consequence. The ability to practice this reasoning can be considered one of the basic defining human characteristics. For example, if students study hard, the antecedent, they are likely to get good grades, which is C, the consequence. You guessed right. We cannot put anything into A, such as if the student eats pizza, he gets good grades. Therefore, this inference illustrates deductive validity, but that deductive validity does not equate with truth. You can reach deductively valid conclusions that are completely untrue with respect to the world. Whether the conclusion is true depends on the truthfulness of the premises. Let us focus our attention on deductive validity of reasoning. A deductive argument is said to be valid if and only if it takes a form that makes it impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion nevertheless to be false. Otherwise, a deductive argument is said to be invalid. A deductive argument is sound if and only if it is both valid and all of its premises are actually true. Otherwise, a deductive argument is unsound. To explain it in other words, an argument is deductively valid if and only if it is impossible that its conclusion is false, given its premises are true. Let us look at two types of arguments in terms of deductive.
Okay, sorry about the interruption of that, but I am wanting to go through all this. Settings on my screen. Oh, no, I don't want that. Okay.
Custom alerts is one of the coolest ways that you can make your stream stand out and be more personalized to your own liking. In today's video, we are going to show you exactly how to make these and do them quite easily. Let's jump on into it. How's it going, everyone? My name is The King, and I'll be your host, and welcome back to the Streamloop channel. In today's video, we are going to be showing you guys how to create custom alerts for your stream, so this can go for your followers, your subscribers, any bits that you get, etc. Now, there's a few methods that you can do this. You can fully customize this to be whatever you like, and you can make it very personalized, or if you're looking for an alternative route, something that's a little bit quicker and straight to the point, you can download some awesome presets, and we're going to show you guys how to do both of those in this video. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. So the first thing that you're going to need for your custom alert is a animated emote. Now, this is to fully customize it. If you don't have emotes, or you don't have an animated emote, you can take a look at our tutorials where we show you how to fully animate your very own emote. It is a well put together video, and that's basically going to teach you how to do it. You can also commission your emotes to get this, and if you don't have any, you can always look on places like Etsy or Fiverr to get yourself some quick to use emotes. You can also commission an emote artist if you want to go the full customization route, but once you have everything in order, it's time to jump on in how to do this. So simply put, you want to head over to your OBS. Once you're in your OBS, you're going to have a little bit of inception here. All you're going to do is to click on the little plus to add a new source. Once there, you're going to see essential sources, and one of the first things at the top is alert box. Here, you can add it in. From here, you're going to create a new source if it asks you. This is just to make sure the old one is in there, and now you're going to have a bunch of different options. You see donation, merge, share, etc. So you can set this up how you want. I personally take my followers off because we have a lot of followers throughout the stream, and sometimes it can get a little bit of spam. So we like to turn that one off. It is all up to you. So let's start off with a standard one. We have a donation one, and as you can see, we have ourselves a custom little overlay right here. If this were to end up playing on our stream, if we go onto the test widget, and then we head on over to the donation section, we can see that this pops up on screen like so. We get a little notification of who has donated, and then it goes away, nice and fully customized. Again, we teach you exactly how to do that customized alert in our other videos, so make sure you go and check it. So if you have anything, all you simply need to do is to basically click on here where it says no media, and you're going to change your media. From here, you can drag and drop any custom animation you have. As you can see, we have quite a lot of different animations. So let's say we were just doing a standard animated emote that we have. So we're going to click on this love emote that we have for the donation, which is fine. Again, you can use whatever you want. You could use the cash, for example, similar to what we had up there, and simply put, you just click on done. Once that is gone and uploaded, you can then customize this a little bit more, adding a custom sound alert. This way, you can know exactly what sound is going to be played, and you can make this customized to you. A lot of people like putting in some of their own voice lines, etc. Whatever floats the boat. From here, you change the template of who has donated and what amount. You can set the minimum trigger. And there's also animations that ask you how long the animation should be, etc. Things like that. You can customize your font as well to match the colors. For this example, we are doing a donation, so we're going to keep the colors at green, but you can pretty much change this to whatever color you want. Anything that really floats the boat, it's all up to you what colors you want here. Once you've done that, select your layout, and then that is pretty much it. You are good to go. And then if you go ahead and test a donation, you can now see we have a little Ari lion, and then we have the text that pops up, and just like that, you have yourself a custom alert. So again, all you realistically need in order to do this is your very own animated emotes. Now again, you don't actually need to have emotes. If you don't have custom emotes, there's tons of things that you can get online. For example, we got this custom bit overlay that you can get, so anytime someone shares some bits, this pops up instead, and it will trigger about how much bits they've given. So this is a custom animation that you can easily get online by purchasing it. You can again find these on Etsy, find these on Fiverr, wherever the case may be. And again, to simply show you this, you can click on free Twitch alerts. You can go to any of these pages and look for what's available for free. Of course, you can purchase them as well. But once you find that, you can find some animated things. And these are basically going to be your custom alerts. You would have to look around and see which one really matches you. But as you can see here, we have some free to use custom alerts. And this is more of the text ones rather than the animated ones. And it gets the job done. So there you go, my friends. That is how you set up your animated alerts. Quite simple to do. Again, if you have these animations, it's easy to do. You can mess around with the fonts and the settings too. Get it in a nice spot and make everything look good. You can also find some of these free to use online if you're looking for a quicker way of doing this. Because in order to animate it, obviously, you need to go into Photoshop or Vegas, whatever you're using, Adobe, Premiere Pro, and animate the emotes completely or commission them. I hope this video really did help you guys. And if you're looking
Hi, I'm Thomas Anderson. Like many of you, I work with computers. I like the freedom I feel outside the limitations of the real world. But computers are also mirrors, reflecting back who and what we are and the choices we make, the worlds we build. They also confront us with questions about why we want to choose this over that, why we want to make X instead of Y. Where do ideas of who we are and what we want even come from?
You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This isn't real. What is real? How do you define real?
For instance, I'm not even sure why I'm here. I remember waking up and thinking that I'm supposed to come here, that it was important for me to ask people, how do we know what is real? Hi, I'm Keanu Reeves. Over 20 years ago, I first played the character Thomas Anderson in the Matrix trilogy. Those films pioneered digital cinema with shots like bullet time. Back then, we talked a lot about where the digital age might take cinema and narrative. In an industry where actors have tried to remain perpetually young, we wondered about digital faces that could become immortal.
Hi, I'm Carrie Ann Moss, and I played Trinity in the Matrix films. 20 years ago, we asked ourselves how long it would be before faces and bodies could be changed as easily as we change clothes.
We wondered, what would identity mean in a completely digital world?
And what would reality mean when a world we can build feels as real as our own?
What just happened?
Yeah, this is what they wanted. They said they were fine with your theoretical mumbo-jumbo, but they needed some sexy action.
Who's that?
The marketing people.
Marketing? I thought we were supposed to have total creative control.
Welcome to the Matrix.
You still got it.
Like riding a bike, they say.
I sometimes miss this version of us.
Me too.
The hell are you doing back there?
Sorry, I was told this is a sim preparing me to fight the system.
Right on. You know about this?
Yeah, it's all supposed to be a little unreal.
Word of advice. Agents are bad, but whatever you do, stay the hell away from marketing. See you soon.
So, what now?
Haven't you ever watched a movie before? Shoot the tires.
Say no more. Get them off us. boys are gonna get a kick out of this. Come and get it. You again. Hold steady. Hell yeah! What are you doing? Time to blow this box down.
Imagine a world where every creator can bring their film and television idea to life in a matter of days. A world where these ideas are funded by a supportive community. An ecosystem where these ideas are monetized in the universe and the metaverse. RightStream makes this vision a reality. With a RightStream launchpad for film and television, creators will connect with a vibrant community that supports their creative projects. Where content can be streamed on the RightStream app, as well as in cinemas in the metaverse. The revenues generated will flow back to the rightful owners via a transparent blockchain network. RightStream is a new way to own and trade film and TV NFTs that have intrinsic value and generate revenues for decades. Setting creativity free.
So you want to know where to invest $1,000 right now? Well, forget about
Explore, like never before, with Niantic.
we send?
Right, that's where we're in position. Bravo team offloads here. Alpha team stays on board to land down range. This is capture or kill. Watch the containers!
Portia, or us.
Anywhere I roam. Any novel. Sorry, get it novel. Free to speak my mind anywhere. Ain't no redefine anywhere. Mexican Special Forces, 141, they are your brothers now. Where I lay my head is all there. Weapons hard against us. Pre-order now. Get early access to the open beta.
Wow. Okay. Nope. Way too expensive. Why 4? What, huh?
Looking for something long-term? Or maybe you just want to have a little fun? Xbox Game Pass will find you the perfect match. Flippant is a grunt who's good at putting others first, and he'll put you first for the rest of his painfully short life. While he's got a reputation for being the strong silent type, Agent 47, or 47 to his friends, is really sweet and sensitive deep down. No, deeper. Alejandro the Cactus needs a hug. He lives for the adrenaline-fueled thrill of cars drifting past his corner, marveling at their pinpoint precision as they maneuver. His killer looks and adventurous spirit, you can be sure this crew member is definitely the real deal. Interested? Head on over to Electrical and see if sparks fly. So no matter your type or genre preference, you can find your one true game with Xbox Game Pass.
If Philly Gar...
That's another plane, right?
Not exactly.
Oh, could you be the one to call when I lose control?
I need your...
I'll be if you can be right. I do the same thing I told you that I never would. Told you I changed, even when I knew I never could.
Hola, soy Dora. Can you say puedes hacerme un sandwich? That means can you make me a sandwich in Spanish?
I'ma pull your flexing on these niggas like a rope.
thing I would do, you were standing there by my side. And now you gon' be ready for the last ride. It's been a long day without you, my friend. And I'll tell everything sucks. Just kidding, everything is great. No, really, I haven't thought about my ex today. Oh wait, fuck, I just did. But I went outside for the first time in a few days, and it felt nice, and I might try doing exercise. I wanna forget my bad days, all my bad days, and be okay, and be okay. Spend my spare change down at the arcade, and then I'll say everything sucks. Just kidding.
You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see?
Starters, LEDs are the vivid color changing lights perfect for any room. Get our best selling LEDs for 40% off today by clicking the link below.
Are you okay? Do you need something?
I need somebody who can love me.
Bark at your dog.
I'll be fucked up if you can't be right. I do the same thing I told you that I never would. Told you I changed, even when I knew I never could.
Your shit, get my bed, didn't take my fucking meds. I feel like my ears, everything just disappears. Don't wanna be someone else, just don't wanna hate myself, just don't wanna hate myself. Said I wanna feel good.
Shawty gon' get that paper. Shawty gon' flip like razor. Shawty got with the flavor. Put my tits in makeup. Pay her, but then hit that layup. Shawty ain't with the games, yo. Shawty gon' get that paper. Pay her. I've been trying not to go off the deep end. I don't think you wanna give me a reason.
The beats, I'm to the beats, I'm to the beats, I'm to the beats, I'm to the beat.
Okay. Undo. Ohio. Wow, okay. Alright, watch. Steel Series, Microsoft, Trading. Thanks. Good. Yep. Again. Confirmed. see. There's no more.
Validity. These are called modus ponens and modus tollens arguments. Modus ponens is the rule of logic which states that if a conditional statement, such as if P, then Q is accepted, and the antecedent P holds, then the consequent Q may be inferred. In the modus ponens argument, the reasoner affirms the antecedent. For example, take the argument, if you are a husband, then you are married. Harrison is a husband, therefore Harrison is married. The shorthand notation for if P then Q is P arrow Q full stop. The shorthand for therefore is 3 dots in a triangle form. Hence, the shorthand for the modus ponens argument is P arrow Q, and P is therefore Q. Modus tollens is the rule of logic which states that if a conditional statement, such as if P, then Q is accepted, and the consequence does not hold, it is not Q, then the negation of the antecedent, not P, can be inferred or confirmed. This is an argument using the rule of modus tollens. For example, if you are a husband, then you are married. Harrison is not married, therefore he is not a husband. See the shorthand for the modus tollens argument on the screen. Did you know that the words modus tollens stem from the Latin language, and it is also known as modus tollendo, which is the Latin word for mode that by denying denies, and therefore it denies a consequence. Hence, it is a deductive argument form and a rule of inference. Cheng and Holyoake investigated how people use deductive reasoning in realistic situations. They suggested that, rather than using formal inference rules, people often use pragmatic reasoning schemas. These are general organizing principles or rules that are related to particular kinds of goals, such as permissions, obligations, or causations. These schemas sometimes are referred to as pragmatic rules. Such pragmatic rules are not as abstract as formal logical rules, yet they are sufficiently general and broad so that they can apply to a wide variety of specific situations. The pragmatic reasoning schema structure is determining of the kinds of inferences people make with different schemas corresponding to different logical patterns. Let us peek into logic. We have spoken about it, but let us look at what logic means in a scientific sense. Oxford Languages defines logic in 2 different ways. Firstly, it can be defined as reasoning conducted or assessed according to strict principles of validity, and secondly, it can be defined as a system or set of principles underlying the arrangements of elements in a computer or electronic device as to perform a specific task. Class, now that we've addressed conditional reasoning, let us move over to syllogistic reasoning. Syllogism, as you know, is a form of deductive reasoning where you would arrive at a specific conclusion by examining 2 or more premises or ideas. The word syllogism derives from the Greek word syllogismos, and it means conclusion or inference. Syllogisms are deductive arguments that lead one to draw conclusions from two premises. All syllogisms comprise a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. There are two key types of syllogisms, although others also exist. For the sake of psychology and this lesson, we will discuss linear syllogisms and categorical syllogisms. Let us speak about linear syllogisms first. In a linear syllogism, each of the two premises is descriptive of a particular relationship between items, with at least one of the items being common to both premises. The items may be objects, categories, attributes, or anything that can be related to something. The logicians have assigned the term of the major premise as the subject, the common term as the middle term, and the second term of the minor premise as the predicate. In a linear syllogism, the relationship amongst the items is linear, and it involves quantitative or qualitative comparison, in which each term shows either more or less of a particular attribute or quantity. Let me give you an example. You are smarter than your best friend. Your best friend is smarter than your roommate. So which of you is the smartest? Class, let us look at this example of a linear syllogism. This example includes a logical deduction that you can reach based on linear syllogism. Premise A's first term, or the item, is you. The linear relationship is are smarter than. Premise B's first term or item is your best friend. The linear relationship is smarter than. And the second term or item is your roommate. The conclusion would include who is the smartest. Think about it. Who would be the smartest? And is deductive validity the same as truth? What is your opinion? Is deductive validity the same as truth? Even as we assume that a conclusion that is deductively valid, it may not be objectively true. Although in this previous example, where the linear syllogism shows that you are the smartest, it is true. Note though that your friend or your roommate may not agree with you based on their definitions of what being smart means. It therefore relies on objectivity. On this next level, we combine more than one categorical proposition to form logical arguments. A categorical syllogism can be viewed as an argument that consists of three categorical propositions. It contains two premises and a conclusion in which there appear a total of exactly three categorical terms, each of which is used exactly twice. In categorical syllogisms, we get three terms. These are the minor terms, the major terms, and the middle terms. When we look at the terms of categorical syllogisms, we shall see they include minor, major, and middle terms. The subject term of the conclusion of the syllogism is called the minor term of the syllogism as a whole. The major term of the syllogism is whatever acts as the predicate term of the conclusion. The predicate term is that which grounds or establishes the conclusion or argument as a whole. The third term, called the middle term, doesn't occur in the conclusion, but it is necessary to be employed somewhere in each of its premises. Hence, the term is called the middle term. In terms of categorical syllogisms, one of the premises of the syllogism must be a categorical proposition that affirms some relation between its middle and major terms, and we call that the major premise of the syllogism. The other premise that links the middle and minor terms is called the minor premise. Let me provide you with two examples of categorical syllogisms. Maybe you can think of some more and send them to me. In this example, the major premise is all cars have wheels. The minor premise is I drive a car. And the conclusion is my car has wheels. In our second example, the major premise is all spiders frighten me. The minor premise is a spider is an insect. And the conclusion is some insects frighten me. Let me show you a circle diagram of a categorical syllogism. Can you see in this circle diagram that all cognitive psychologists are pianists and all pianists are athletes? Therefore, all cognitive psychologists are athletes. Here the subject is the cognitive psychologists, the middle term is the pianists, and the predicate is the athletes. In both premises, we deduced that all members of the category of the first term are members of the category of the second term. Let us consider the four premises of categorical syllogisms. These include universal affirmatives, universal negatives, particular affirmatives, and particular negatives. Class, let us have a look at this table that explains the types of premises. In terms of universal affirmatives, the form of premise statement is all A's are B's. The description is that the premise positively affirms that all members of the first class are members of the second class. It is quite easy. It basically means that all A's are equal to B's in mathematical terms. Secondly, the universal negative states that no A's are B's or all A's are not B's. Therefore, they are not related at all. This premise states that none of the members of the first class are members of the second class. Now we're getting to particular affirmatives and particular negatives. The particular affirmative statement states that some A's are B's, such as some fruits are edible, but not all. Think about fruits on trees in the wild. They are fruits of trees, but not all of them are edible because they can be toxic. This premise states that only some of the members of the first class are members of the second class. In terms of particular negatives, it states that some A's are not B's. It means that some members of the first class are not members of the second class. In all kinds of syllogisms, some combinations of premises may lead to no logically valid conclusions. In terms of categorical syllogisms, we cannot draw logically valid conclusions from categorical syllogisms with two particular premises or with two negative premises. For example, some educational psychologists are left-handed. Some left-handed people are smart. Based on these premises, we cannot conclude even that some educational psychologists are smart, because the left-handed people who are smart may not be the same left-handed people who are educational psychologists. What are the aids and obstacles to deductive reasoning? Heuristics in syllogistic reasoning include overextension errors, in which we overextend, therefore overuse the strategies that work in some syllogisms to syllogisms in which the strategies fail us. We may also experience foreclosure effects when we do not consider all possibilities of a situation before reaching a conclusion. We may experience biases in terms of believability. It seems that if a statement seems believable, people are more likely to accept a statement as being believable, whether there are true grounds or confirmation for it or not. To enhance deductive reasoning abilities, we should try to avoid heuristics and biases because they distract and distort our reasoning. We should in turn engage in practices that facilitate reasoning. These include taking the necessary time to reach and evaluate a conclusion. Effective reasoners consider more than one alternative conclusion than do poor reasoners. In addition, you can train and practice your reasoning skills. Develop your mental models and don't just rely on one or a few models to reach a conclusion. The more mental models you use given a set of premises, the more confident you can be that if your conclusion is not valid, it will be disconfirmed. Hence, the use of multiple mental models will also help you to avoid the tendency to engage in confirmation bias. A mental model is an internal representation of information that corresponds to your ways of thinking, and you generally use them to reason. If you expand your horizons to include more ways of thinking and reasoning, you will expand on your mental models, giving you more options for reasoning effectively. Class, before we move on to inductive reasoning, I want to share something with you. An anonymous person once quoted, "Do not base your decisions on the advice of those who don't have to deal with the results or consequences." Remember, all choices or decisions have consequences. The choices you can take responsibility for are your own. There's nothing wrong with asking advice from those close to you, but ultimately, the responsibility for the choices you make lie with you. Take enough time to ensure that you make the decision that is right for you and your life at the correct time. Students, before we continue with inductive reasoning, I want to delight you on what to expect in Lesson 8 of this module. We will inspect and address intelligence, the major cognitive approaches to the development of intelligence and the structures of intelligence. We will learn about information processing and intelligence. The world today is full of information, and such information is available at our fingertips. Sometimes I feel like I have information overload and too many choices to choose from because we have so much information available to us. Furthermore, we will address alternative approaches to intelligence, such as cultural contexts and Gardner and Sternberg's theories of intelligence. The lesson will conclude with the intelligence of computer systems and how the brain compares to computer system. I cannot wait to conclude this module with intelligence and artificial intelligence and to move on with you to module 3. I really look forward to providing you with as much useful information to apply to your everyday lives. It is now time for us to consider core objective 3 for this lesson, which includes inductive reasoning. As mentioned before, people use reasoning strategies to reach logic. We just discussed deductive reasoning, which is a basic form of valid reasoning. Deductive reasoning or deduction starts out with a general statement or hypothesis and examines the possibilities to reach a specific logical conclusion. Inductive reasoning, on the other hand, is the opposite from deductive reasoning. It makes broad generalizations from specific observations. In research, the researchers will aim at getting data, and from that data, conclusions are made. In addressing inductive reasoning, we will consider the following: reaching causal inferences, categorical inferences, and reasoning by analogy. One way to study inductive reasoning is to examine causal inferences. Causal inferences are that which explain how people make judgments about whether something causes something else. Process of reaching causal inferences includes 4 bases, 2 which are confirmatory and 2 which are disconfirmatory. Let's explore these. In trying to reach causal inferences, that is trying to determine whether one occurrence or process caused another, you can use confirmation. In this first confirmatory causal inference, the joint presence of the possibly causal event and the outcome is the basis for the inference. Here, if an event and an outcome tend to occur together, people are more likely to believe that the event causes the outcome. For example, if all cigarette smokers developed lung cancer, we could infer that cigarette smoking in general might be a big or a sole contributor to contracting lung cancer. In this second confirmatory causal inference, it is the joint absence of the possible causal event and the outcome that is relevant. If the outcome, such as lung cancer, does not occur in the absence of the possibly causal event, which is smoking cigarettes, then people are more likely to believe that the event causes the outcome. Therefore, if no cigarette smokers ever contracted lung cancer, people will still believe that cigarette smoking is the single most predictable cause for lung cancer, and if you don't smoke cigarettes, you will not develop lung cancer. In this first causal inference of disconfirmation, the presence of the possible causal event but the absence of the outcome is relevant. Therefore, if the possible causal event is present but not the outcome, then the event is believed to be less likely to lead to the outcome. In our smoking example, we know that a lot of cigarette smokers do develop lung cancer, and smoking is a risk factor for developing cancer. However, not all people who develop lung cancer have smoked cigarettes in their lives before. So, although smoking cigarettes puts you at a greater risk for developing lung cancer, there is no guarantee that you will develop lung cancer if you did smoke. Our second causal inference of disconfirmation in terms of inductive reasoning is related to the absence of the possible causal event but the presence of the outcome. To take our example of the cigarette smokers further, we could infer that because some people who have never smoked cigarettes before have developed lung cancer, we can deduce that it is not always smoking cigarettes that cause lung cancer, despite its high risk factor. In short, if the outcome occurs in the absence of the possibly causal event, then the event is viewed as less likely to lead to the outcome. Let us move on to address categorical inferences class. Before we move on to categorical inferences, let me ask you this question. Are you wondering about cause and effect? The dictionary explains it as follows. Cause and effect is a relationship between events or things, where one is the result of the other or others. This is a combination of action and reaction. However, remember, sometimes the cause of an effect is difficult to detect, and on other occasions, it is easy. Let us now move on to categorical inferences. When making categorical inferences, people tend to use both top-down and bottom-up strategies. In this way, they use bottom-up strategies based on the information from their sensory experiences, and top-down strategies based on what they already know or have inferred previously in their lives for making inferences. From these observations, people form an abstract prototype, a category comprising rules or rule clusters or category-like networks of associated characteristics. For example, if we think about birds of prey like owls and eagles, we are more likely to put these animals in the category of birds rather than in the animal category, because they are more representative of the bird category than the broader category of animals. Before we conclude this lesson, we are now going to address reasoning by analogy. Inductive reasoning may be applied to an even broader range of situations than those that require causal inferences or categorical inferences. For example, inductive reasoning may be applied to reasoning by analogy. When we reason analogically, we proceed from the observation that two or more things are similar in some respects to the conclusion that they're probably similar in some other respect as well. An example of an analogy is as follows. P is similar to Q in certain known aspects. P has some other feature which is R. Therefore, we can deduce that Q also has the feature R. Numbers 1 and 2 are the premises, and number 3 is the conclusion. Class, before we conclude this lesson, let us do a recap on what you have learned today. This lesson's title is Decision Making and Reasoning. We reason every day, and by doing so, it helps us to make decisions or to come to some sort of conclusion about things or events. Sometimes we find that we made the right decisions, and sometimes we clearly can see that we made the wrong ones. That happens. However, in this lesson, I taught you about judgment and decision making, and we went even further to explore deductive and inductive reasoning. We also looked into premises to explain how they fit into the picture of reasoning to come to a conclusion. I want to motivate you to become aware of your reasoning and decision making and what types of reasoning you use. I want you to broaden your mental models, and what that means is merely to become more open to the ways that you reason. Don't just use one method, but imply a variety of ways that you look at the problem at hand, and practice these so that you can learn to reason in more than one or just a few ways. You will find that it will aid in your decision making and help you see the world differently. Thanks for joining me for class today, students. Use and think about your judgment and decision making this week.
Okay.
Hello. We've been treating several people with stomach aches, all from having drank the polluted water. The river is our main source of water, so there's not much we can do. Goodbye.
Ever since the water's been polluted, people here have been getting ill. Stomach aches.
Is there anything I can do to help?
Well, now, yes, actually. Phyllis has been working on a new antitoxin for a while now. It has some effect on the stomach aches, but she thinks it needs a better primer to maximize it. We're considering the use of bamboo papayas. If you have time, please find some for her to test out. I think there are some wild bamboo papayas over in the collapsed wasteland.
Whoops. Okay. Module 2, Lesson 7.
Good day, students. Today we will address intelligence and artificial intelligence. Have you ever wondered what the key issues are in measuring intelligence and what other alternative views for intelligence exist? Can intelligence be improved, and how does the human brain measure up to a man-made computer? These concerns will be included in today's lesson. You will learn about how intelligence is acquired in childhood in Module 3 when we talk about childhood development, so look out for that piece of the puzzle. For now though, we will focus on adult intelligence, its measurements, different approaches to it, and a comparison between human and artificial intelligence. For this lesson we have 4 core objectives. These include the description of measures and structures of intelligence, discussing alternative approaches to intelligence, addressing artificial intelligence in terms of computer simulations, and determining whether intelligence can be improved or not. Let us start our lesson class. The title for this lesson today, as you know, is Human and Artificial Intelligence. We will start with the measures and structures of intelligence. But before we start, let us look at the history of how intelligence was first measured. Did you know that the first modern intelligence test in IQ history was developed by Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon in 1904? The reason for this was the French government and Department of Education at the time asked these 2 gentlemen to develop a test that would allow distinguishing between mentally retarded children from normally intelligent but lazy children. The test was called the Simon-Binet IQ test and measured children on logical reasoning, finding rhyming words, and naming objects. Let's first look into what intelligence is defined as. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the word intelligence was entered into the English language during the 12th century. Although we all have our own ideas of what we view as someone being intelligent, there is a formal definition for it. According to Sternberg, intelligence can be defined as the capacity to learn from experience, using metacognitive processes to enhance learning, and the ability to adapt to the surrounding environment, which may require different adaptations within different social and cultural contexts. You've probably heard of emotional intelligence before. Let's peek into that before we commence with our lesson. In recent years, the term emotional intelligence has become very popular with companies employing people, considering emotional intelligence as important a factor as general intelligence. So what does emotional intelligence entail? Meyer, Salovey, and Caruso, as cited in Sternberg, have defined emotional intelligence as the ability to perceive and express emotion, assimilate emotion in thought, understand and reason with emotion, and regulate emotion in the self and others. So why do I talk to you about emotional intelligence? Well, it is important because it helps us connect with other people through our emotions. By being able to adequately express your emotions and understand the emotions of others when they express it, it is easier to build successful relationships with them. Successful interpersonal relationships entail one of the cornerstones for working together in a workplace, forming friendships and supporting each other when life gets difficult. Have you ever wondered about the key issues in intelligence and how different theorists approach intelligence? Do you want to learn more about some alternative views on intelligence? And do you often wonder about how computers and electronic devices are assimilated to carry out our instructions? Lastly, do you think that intelligence is fixed or whether it can be improved? I will attempt to answer all these questions for you in this lesson. I hope you enjoy this lesson and find it insightful. It is officially the start of our lesson addressing intelligence. Let us start with the measures and structures of intelligence. Have you ever tried explaining the word intelligence to someone? Of course, we all have our own ideas about what intelligence is, but how should it be defined? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines intelligence as 1. The ability to learn or understand or to deal with new or trying situations. It also mentions that intelligence is related to the skilled use of reason. Secondly, intelligence is defined as the ability to apply knowledge to manipulate one's environment or to think abstractly as measured by objective criteria, such as tests. Lastly, the dictionary associates the word intelligence with mental acuteness or shrewdness.
In addressing and discussing the measures and structures of intelligence, we will be looking into the following components: the history of intelligence testing and scoring, intelligence scales, and factor analysis of intelligence. The history of intelligence testing can be traced back to two very different historical traditions. The first one was aimed at concentrating on the measurement of lower-level psychophysical abilities such as sensory awareness and accurateness, physical strength, and motor coordination. This approach was developed and executed by Francis Galton in 1883. The second approach was developed by Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon and was focused on the ability of children to learn in an academic setting. Binet was strongly convinced that judgment is one of the key characteristics of intelligence and therefore developed his test focusing heavily on judgment. In looking back on historical times and how intelligence measurement was developed, we will be addressing the following concepts: the intelligence scales developed by Binet, Simon, and Terman, the Wechsler intelligence scales, factor analysis of intelligence, Spearman's G factor, Thurstone and his primary mental abilities view, Guildford and how he explained the structure of intelligence, Cattell, Vernon, and Carroll, who focused on hierarchical models. Lewis Terman of Stanford University built on the work of Binet and Simon's work and constructed the earliest version of what is called the Stanford-Binet intelligence scales. For many years, the Stanford-Binet intelligence test, or scale, was the only one used until the establishment of the Wechsler scales, which is more widely used today. These scales will be discussed further on in this lesson. The Stanford-Binet intelligence scale measures the following attributes: verbal reasoning, which includes the comprehension of vocabulary, absurdities, and verbal relations. Quantitative reasoning, which includes number series and quantitative problems. Figural or abstract reasoning, measuring pattern analysis and short-term memory. Let me present you with a table format of the Stanford-Binet intelligence scale. The next 3 slides will explain the properties that the Stanford-Binet intelligence scales measured. Let us first look at this one slide that explains the testing of verbal reasoning. The tables on each slide consist of a content area, tasks or questions, and an example of a task or a question. Verbal reasoning tested vocabulary, comprehension, absurdities, and verbal relations. In terms of vocabulary, the test taker will be asked to describe the meaning of a word. An example of such a question may be, what does the word resilient mean? In terms of comprehension, the task will be to understand why the world works in the way that it does. The task or question might contain something like, why do people sometimes use credit cards? When we consider absurdities, the task or question might contain to identify an oddness or absurdity in a picture. An example of this task might be to exhibit the ability to recognize the difference between office workers and one person dressed up as a clown or someone wearing sports clothing. In terms of verbal relations, the task will contain to describe similarities in several items and how they differ from one another or from another item. An example of such a task may be to note that some objects in a picture are edible or part of the food category, and the others are not. This slide demonstrates the testing of quantitative and figural or abstract reasoning. In terms of quantitative reasoning, firstly, number series is tested. The task or question will be to complete a series of numbers, and the example of the task or question will be to recognize the number in the sequence that will be next to come in the sequence. Please see the example on the slide. Next, the test taker's quantitative abilities are tested. The task is to solve simple arithmetic word problems. An example of this is that Mary has 6 apples and she wants to evenly divide it between 3 people. How many apples will each person receive? The second attribute tested on this slide, as you will see, is figural or abstract reasoning. The content area to be assessed is pattern analysis. The task is for the test taker to be asked to fit together a puzzle to form various geometric shapes. In the example of the question, you will see what types of shapes the test taker will be asked to build with the puzzle pieces, such as these ones on the screen. This last slide is concerned with short-term memory. Here, memory for sentences, digits, and objects will apply. The task for a memory of a sentence will be that the test taker will listen to a sentence and ask to repeat it back exactly to the examiner. The test taker may be asked to repeat the sentence, "Christian went to sleep very late last night because he was studying." When considering memory for digits, the test taker will listen to a sequence of digits and repeat it back exactly to the examiner. An example may include to ask the test taker to repeat the numbers 26, 19, 2, 4, 8, and 10 in exactly the same sequence back to the examiner. For memory of objects, the test taker will watch the examiner point to a series of pictures of objects and will then be asked to name the objects the examiner pointed at. The example of memory for objects may include to point to the picture of a golf club, a tennis ball, a scarecrow, and carrot if the examiner pointed to these. Let us consider the Wechsler intelligence scales next. The Wechsler intelligence scales were developed by David Wechsler, and there are 3 tests in this series, namely the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, or otherwise called the WAIS, now in its 3rd edition. The Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, or the WISC-3, and the Wechsler Preschool and Primary Scale of Intelligence, also called the WPPSI. The Wechsler Intelligence Scales yield 3 types of scores, namely a verbal score, a performance score, and an overall score. The verbal score renders results on comprehension, vocabulary, information on general knowledge, similarities, arithmetic, and digit span. The performance scale gives score results on object assembly, block design, picture completion, picture arrangement, and digit symbols. Although Wechsler believed in intelligence testing, he did not limit his thinking of intelligence to just testing alone. Instead, he believed that intelligence is central to our everyday lives and not just represented by a test score, or even what we do in school, college, or at work. According to Wechsler, we use our intelligence to perform our jobs and to manage our lives effectively. Some issues in the approach to studying intelligence have arisen in terms of the topics of intelligence. In particular, cognitive psychologists debate over whether we should focus on the measurement of intelligence or on the processes of intelligence. They want to understand what underlies intelligence. And many a researcher has asked the question of whether it is a person's genetic heredity, acquired attributes, or an interaction between the two that influences intelligence. Let us consider factor analysis and intelligence. Factor analysis is ultimately a statistical method. It is used to separate a construct, and in this case, it is intelligence. It separates intelligence into several hypothetical factors or abilities that researchers believe form the basis of individual differences in test performance. Let's continue with factor analysis. Factor analysis is based on studies of correlation. Thus, the more highly 2 tests are correlated, the more likely they are to measure the same construct. In terms of intelligence, a factor analysis might involve the following steps. To render large groups of people several different tests of ability or intelligence. Thereafter, determining the correlations among all those tests will take place, and statistical analyses of such correlations will be done to simplify them into a smaller number of factors that summarize people's performance on the test. There are many factor theories, with the main ones being those of Spearman, Guildford, Cattell, Vernon, and Carroll. We will address these theories next. The G factor, also known as general intelligence, general mental ability, or the general intelligence factor, was developed by Charles Spearman, who is known to have invented factor analysis. Spearman was of the notion that intelligence can be understood in terms of both a single general factor that encompasses performance on all tests of mental ability and a set of specific factors. each of which is involved in performance on a single type of mental ability test, for example, mathematical computations. To Spearman, the general factor, which he labeled G, provides the key to understanding intelligence. In contrast to Spearman, Louis Thurston had the opinion that the core of intelligence does not only rest on one single factor, but that it resides in 7 factors, to which we refer to as primary mental abilities. These 7 factors include the following: verbal comprehension, that was measured by vocabulary tests; verbal fluency, that was measured by time-limited tests that required the test taker to think of as many words as possible that begin with a given letter; inductive reasoning, that was measured by tests containing analogies and number series completion tasks; spatial visualization, measured by tests requiring mental rotation of pictures of objects; numbers, that were measured by computation and simple mathematical problem-solving tests; memory, that was measured by picture and word recall tests; perceptual speed, that was measured by tests that required the test taker to recognize small differences in pictures or to cross out the letter A in strings of varied letters. The J.P. Guildford model of intellect is called the structure of intellect, or the SOI model, which includes up to 150 factors of the mind in one version of the theory. According to Guildford, intelligence can be described in the form of a cube that represents an intersection of 3 dimensions, namely various operations, contents, and products. Operations are mental processes such as memory and evaluation such as making judgments. Contents appear in a problem and includes semantics such as words and visual images such as pictures. Products are the kinds of responses required, such as units of single words, numbers, or pictures. Classes such as hierarchies and implications. Many psychology professionals felt that 100 to 150 factors to consider when studying intelligence were too many. Guildford's most important attribute to the field of intelligence testing includes his consideration of various kinds of mental operations, contents, and products in our views, and how intelligence is assessed through it. Let us consider the 3-stratum model of intelligence development by Cattell, Vernon, and Carroll. This is a model of intelligence based on a factorial reanalysis of several hundreds of data sets available in the literature. It is also considered by some researchers to be the most thorough psychometric theory of intelligence. The 3 strata include minor group factors at the first or lowest level. This minor group of factors are narrow abilities that are assessed and include abilities such as rate of learning, level of mastery, and response speed. The major group factors are at the second level and are more broad. It is at this level where fluid and crystallized intelligence, general memory, learning, visual and auditory perception, retrieval ability, cognitive speed, and processing speed are situated at. And the third strata include the general factor, or G, which is at the highest level of this model. After having discussed the measures and structures of intelligence, let's now move on to consider alternative approaches to intelligence. But before we go on with that, you've just heard me mention fluid and crystallized intelligence. So what is that? Well, fluid intelligence refers to the ability to reason and think flexibly. Crystallized intelligence refers to the accumulation of knowledge, facts, and skills that are acquired throughout life. Fluid and crystallized intelligence were introduced by Raymond Cattell, and he went further to develop the theory with John Horn, resulting in the Cattell-Horn theory of fluid and crystallized intelligence. This second part of our lesson encompasses the exploration of alternative approaches to intelligence. Let's start with those. In considering alternative approaches to intelligence, we will address the following concepts: working memory, biological bases for intelligence, cultural contexts and intelligence, Gardner's multiple intelligences, and Sternberg's triarchic theory. Do you remember that we've talked about working memory before when we spoke about the cognitive process of memory? Well, let me refresh your memory on working memory. Working memory is one of our cognitive processes. However, it has limited capacity for holding information we are busy with in the moment, and it is held in memory only temporarily. Working memory aids in reasoning, guiding decision-making, behavior, and executive tasks. Let us consider working memory in terms of intelligence. Working memory is strongly correlated with intelligence in both adults and children. People who perform better on a working memory task tend to perform better on an intelligence task and in intelligence testing in general. Working memory continues to develop into young adulthood, and older children generally outperform younger ones on working memory tasks. When we perform a mathematical calculation, such as 5 plus 12 minus 7 equals 10, the calculation needs to be kept in our brains as we do the calculation. Hence the reason that children who have better working memory perform or score higher in mathematics, language, reading, and intelligence tests. Both intelligence and working memory involve the prefrontal areas of the brain. In adults, there's been evidence that when solving simple to moderately difficult tasks, more intelligent adults show less brain activity than individuals of lower intelligence. It can therefore be deduced that adults of higher intelligence are more efficient problem solvers because they use less brain energy to solve the problem. Let us move on to discuss the biological bases of intelligence. What are the biological bases of intelligence? Well, evidence suggests that for humans there is a modest but significant statistical relationship between brain size and intelligence. However, it is likely that it is more important in how efficiently the brain is used than what its size is. Children with fetal alcohol syndrome show smaller brain size and defects in various areas of the brain. Therefore, brain size can be inferred to be correlated with intelligence in general. Research, as cited in Sternberg, note that complex electrical brain activity prompted by specific stimuli is shown in individuals with high intelligence scores. An alternative approach to studying intelligence in terms of biology suggests that neural efficiency may be related to intelligence. Of particular attention is how the brain metabolizes glucose during mental activities. Heyer and colleagues, as cited in Sternberg, have concluded that more intelligent brains are correlated with reduced levels of glucose metabolism during problem-solving tasks. Therefore, smarter brains consume less sugar than do less smart brains doing the same task. Further findings on the biological basis of intelligence include the following. Cerebral efficiency increases when learning a relatively complex task that involves visuospatial manipulations, such as playing some computer games. Can you see not all computer games are bad? Even though intelligent individuals show overall lower metabolism of glucose in their brains, it has been shown that when they are busy with intricate tasks involving more brain activity, their brains have learned to use more glucose for those specific areas relevant for the task. A factor of concern is that some IQ tests don't measure the ability to set goals, to plan how to meet them, and to execute those plans. Patients with lesions in the frontal area of their brains frequently perform well on IQ tests. Hence, there is a concern whether IQ tests in general are able to efficiently assess persons across all spheres of intelligence. Let us consider cultural contexts and intelligence next. Did you know that there is a term called cultural intelligence? Cultural intelligence or cultural quotient is a term used in business, education, government, and academic research. Cultural intelligence can be understood as the capability to relate and work effectively across cultures. Different cultures may all have different ideas of what it means to be intelligent. Asian and African cultures have a broader view of intelligence. These cultures do not emphasize mental speed, but in return, they focus more heavily on social and emotional aspects of behavior. The above differences in culture are important because people's behaviors in those cultures are not guided by scores on standardized Western test scores, but rather by implicit theories in their cultures. There is no such thing as a culture-free intelligence test. For example, Eskimo children may very well be skilled in hunting, ice fishing, and navigating their ways through the icy wilderness, but they might not score well on a Western standardized intelligence test. Children in some other cultures are taught very early about herbal medicines to cure illnesses, for example, and also do not score well on Western intelligence tests. Let's continue with culture and intelligence. Intelligence tests should measure those attributes that are important for surviving and navigating one's way in that particular culture. Such skills are likely to be partially overlapping across cultures. Therefore, intelligence needs to be understood in terms of its cultural context. As part of alternative approaches to intelligence, let us now move on to discuss Gardner's notion of multiple intelligences. Howard Gardner has proposed a theory of multiple intelligences, in which he poses that intelligence is not just a single construct. He proposed 8 distinct intelligences that are relatively independent of each other, with each being a separate system of functioning. However, each of his proposed intelligences can interact with each other to produce what we can view as an overarching form of intelligence. On the next 2 slides, I'm presenting to you the 8 intelligences that Howard Gardner proposed. The first 4 types of intelligences of Gardner include linguistic intelligence, logical mathematical intelligence, spatial intelligence,